Tonight, a multi-million-dollar effort to derail Donald Trump, and surprisingly, members of his own party are bankrolling it. It is down to the final four major candidates gunning for the Republican nomination.
But there is a major conflict brewing within the party, and it is all about Donald Trump.
Well, with more on this, KCAL9 political reporter Dave Bryan examines the Republican rift, if you will, the critics within the GOP lining up to take down Trump. Dave, good evening.
Good evening. We've got some very scared Republicans tonight and a little bit of role reversal. In the wake of Super Tuesday, Donald Trump says he's now taking on the role of the great unifier. But the Republican establishment isn't surrendering its campaign to derail Trump, even after record turnouts last night in almost every Republican presidential contest, due in large part to Trump. Love him or hate him. The Republican presidential field is effectively shrinking to four major candidates after Dr. Ben Carson said in a statement he sees no path forward to the nomination and he won't be attending a GOP presidential debate on Thursday. One of the four survivors, Marco Rubio, voted for himself this morning in his home state of Florida at an early voting station, 2 weeks before the Florida primary.
It's an incredible privilege and honor to be able to vote for myself for president, just a few blocks from where I grew up.
Florida is a must-win state for Rubio, and Donald Trump holds a double-digit lead in the Florida polls, dismissing Rubio's chances of winning the state.
He is a lightweight, as I've said many times before.
Rubio fired back in an interview with Fox News.
65% of the people who voted yesterday across Super Tuesday did not vote for Donald Trump.
Ted Cruz, who's running second to Trump in the convention delegate count, is telling his supporters the only way to beat Trump is for supporters of Carson, Kasich, and Rubio to switch their allegiance to him.
At this point, if you don't want to see Donald Trump as the nominee, there's only one campaign in a position to beat him. If you've been supporting another candidate, we welcome you on our team.
Trump calls himself a truth teller and a unifier, and in fact, every Super Tuesday Republican contest but one set a new all-time record for voter participation, much higher than in 2008, due largely to Trump's popularity, on a day when Democratic turnout was down from 2008 in every state. But some members of his own party are not convinced that would carry over to the general election in November.
I think we're about ready to lose to the most dishonest politician in America, Hillary Clinton. And how could you do that? Nominate somebody who's crazy. I think dishonest beats crazy.
Former students say Trump University was a scam.
Now a group of big Republican donors is putting millions of dollars into running this attack ad on Trump in an effort to slow down his campaign success.
They're going to put $20 or $25 million into it over the next 2 weeks from what just came over the wires. And frankly, I think that's fine. As far as I'm concerned, it's fine.
But clearly, Trump is now the leading player in a party that's split over the prospect of him winning the nomination.
He's beyond the nightmare stage. Now we're getting to the acceptance stage.
Republican strategist Brad Blakeman says trying to block Trump's nomination would be a big mistake.
If Donald Trump wins fair and square or comes close enough, it would be a disaster not to give it to him.
But former GOP presidential candidate Mitt Romney, who warned last week that Trump's tax forms may contain a bombshell, is expected to speak in Utah tomorrow about the presidential race. And most observers believe he'll raise more doubts about the impact of a Trump nomination on the Republican Party. And tonight, in fact, just a short while ago, the Los Angeles Times came out forcefully against Donald Trump in an editorial. No real surprise given the paper's track record of political endorsements, but it was the choice of words that's making news tonight. Quote, Donald Trump is not fit to be president of the United States. Much of the Republican base has taken leave of its senses. The reality is that Trump has no experience, has shamefully little knowledge of the issues facing the country, and a temperament utterly unsuited to the job. He is a racist and a bully. The Times concluded that people may be angry and want an outsider, but it said, quote, Trump isn't the answer. He's just a cynical manipulator. Donald Trump getting it right in the kisser tonight from the LA Times editorial page. Elsa?